Prime Field.
UConn opened the season looking untouchable, but the year ended with a 62-48 loss to South Carolina and a brutal reality check. A 54-game winning streak was gone, the offense froze, and suddenly the biggest question in women's college basketball wasn't what happened. It was what happens next. Because this is where the 2027 comeback plan begins. This is not about empty revenge talk. This is about a real reset built around what failed, what's already in place, and what's coming next. South Carolina didn't just beat UConn. They exposed exactly what needs to change. UConn shot just 31.1% from the field, got out-rebounded 47-32, and scored only 9 points in the fourth quarter. In the biggest game of the season, the Huskies looked small, rushed, and completely out of rhythm when the pressure peaked. That's why this offseason feels different. This is not a case of a great team just having one bad night. This is a case of a powerhouse getting shown in public exactly where the roster still has cracks. And when a program like UConn gets exposed like that, the response is never passive. The good news for UConn is simple. They already have the star. Sarah Strong is not some future maybe. She already won AP Player of the Year after putting up 18.6 points, 7.6 rebounds, 3.4 steals, and 1.6 blocks per game on 59.4% shooting before the Final Four. That is the kind of player that most programs spend years trying to find. So this comeback plan does not start with panic. It starts with certainty. UConn knows who the centerpiece is, but South Carolina also showed the catch. In that semifinal, Strong scored 12 points and shot 4 for 16. AZ Fudd had 8 points and shot 3 for 15. Together, UConn's two biggest offensive weapons went 7 for 31. That is the lesson. Sarah Strong can be the face of the next era, but UConn cannot put her in a position where she has to solve every major interior problem by herself in April. If the Huskies want to get back on top, they need to build around her better, not just ask more from her. One part of UConn's comeback plan that cannot get overlooked is Blanca Quiñonez. She may not get talked about as much as Sarah Strong or the incoming frontcourt help, but her rise is a huge reason this roster still feels dangerous. As a freshman, Kenyon has averaged 10.7 points, 3.1 rebounds, and 2.1 assists, while shooting 53.6% from the field. That is not just promising. That is immediate impact production, and the timing of her growth matters even more than the raw numbers. In the NCAA tournament, Quiñonez showed exactly why she could become such a big part of the next version of UConn. She scored 16 points against North Carolina in the Sweet 16, then followed that with 20 points and 8 rebounds against Notre Dame in the Elite 8. Those are not empty stats. Those are pressure game performances on the biggest stage. She also brings something bigger than a box score. At 6'2", Quiñonez gives UConn more size on the wing, more versatility, and another player who can help the Huskies stop leaning so heavily on one or two stars. That matters because one of the clearest lessons from the South Carolina loss was that UConn needs more ways to create offense when the primary options get bottled up. And there is also a symbolic side to her rise. Quiñonez is officially the first UConn women's basketball player from South America, arriving from Ecuador after playing professionally in Italy. That makes her one of the more unique additions Geno has made in years, and it adds another layer to why her development feels so important. She's not just another rotation piece. She's part of the next identity of the program. If Sarah Strong is the centerpiece, then Blanca Quiñonez might be the connector, the player who gives UConn another scoring option, another versatile body, and another big game threat as the roster shifts into its next era. That is why she belongs in this comeback story too. That brings us to the most important incoming piece on the board, Olivia Vukosa. UConn officially signed the 6'4" center, and Geno Auriemma described her as the kind of big player the game demands today. That line matters because it tells you exactly what UConn knows it needs more of. Size, strength, rim presence, rebounding, margin for error. Vukosa's junior numbers are ridiculous. 19.4 points, 17.9 rebounds, 5.5 blocks, and 3.8 assists per game. And the timing could not be more obvious. South Carolina just dominated UConn on the glass, 47-32. So Vukosa is not just another recruit with upside. She directly addresses the exact weakness that ended the season. That is how smart offseason planning works. You do not just chase talent in the abstract. You target the problem that got you beat. UConn got pushed around in Phoenix, and now a 6'4" interior presence is arriving to help change the physical profile of the roster. That is not coincidence. That is a response. Vukosa is the headline, but she is not the only addition. UConn also signed Giovanna Popovich, another official 2026 piece who gives the Huskies another option in the backcourt as the roster starts to evolve around Strong. And that matters because comebacks at this level are never about one player. You need a star to build around, but you also need structure. You need depth. You need more lineup combinations. You need players who make your best player's life easier when the games tighten up. That is where UConn's next version starts to get interesting. Strong gives them the centerpiece. Vukosa gives them a direct answer to the rebounding and interior issue. Popovich gives them another layer in the backcourt. Suddenly, this is not a rebuild built on hope alone. It starts to look like an actual roster plan. And then you look at the bigger picture. UConn's current 2027 recruiting board already gives you a preview of where this is headed. The headline name is Kaleena Smith, listed with a 1.0 composite rating on 247 sports. Also on the board are Ivana Wilson, Maniaka at 0.99, Eve Long at 0.99, and Lauren Hassel at 0.99. No, those are not commitments, but they are signals. They tell you the level UConn is still operating at. They tell you the program is not thinking small after a Final Four loss. And they tell you this reset is not about surviving. It is about reloading with elite talent again. That is why UConn stays relevant even after a bracket exit. The next version of the program is already being sketched out in real time. More high-end talent, more versatility, more size, more options. The story did not end with the loss. The next chapter started the second it happened. Now comes the biggest offseason tension point. Audi Crooks entered the transfer portal on April 2nd, 2026, instantly becoming one of the most important names in women's college basketball. She's a 6'3" center who averaged 25.8 points on 64.9% shooting, while also grabbing 7.7 rebounds per game. And to be clear, a player entering the portal does not mean UConn is landing her. That part is still speculation, but the reason people connect the dots is obvious. UConn just lost a Final Four game where it desperately needed more interior scoring, more physicality, and a better answer when perimeter shots stopped falling. Crooks represents the exact type of player who changes that conversation immediately. That is what makes this storyline so big. It is not just about whether one star player might fit. It is about whether UConn is willing to adjust its identity to chase the fastest possible fix. Because Geno Auriemma has not exactly sounded like a portal enthusiast. After the Final Four, he criticized the current system and said revenue sharing and NIL were the death of the mid-majors. That tells you where he stands philosophically. He has always believed in development, in program culture, and building from within. So now the real tension is obvious. Does UConn stay loyal to the old model, or does it adapt more aggressively to the new one? That is the question hanging over this entire comeback plan, because the sport has changed, the timeline for fixes has changed, and the pressure on elite programs to respond immediately has changed too. If UConn stays patient, the foundation is still strong, but if it decides to move aggressively, the ceiling changes even faster. That is why the portal storyline matters, even without a confirmed move. It forces the program into a public decision about what kind of modern powerhouse it wants to be. There is one more reason this story is going to carry into next season. Emotion. The loss to South Carolina did not just end the streak. It ended with a heated post-game exchange between Geno Auriemma and Dawn Staley, and Auriemma later apologized for his behavior. That matters because it made the ending feel bigger than one result. It turned the game into a rivalry moment. It gave the offseason an edge. It made the comeback story feel more personal, more emotional, and more urgent. Now the rematch is not just about rankings or banners or roster construction. Now it feels like unfinished business. When you strip it all down, UConn's 2027 comeback plan is pretty clear. Build around Sarah Strong, who is already a National Player of the Year level star. Add Olivia Vukosa to help fix the rebounding and rim protection issues that got exposed in Phoenix. Keep pushing for elite talent on the 2027 recruiting board, led by names like Kaleena Smith. And stay flexible enough to capitalize if a portal move ever makes sense. That is the plan, not blind hope. not vague motivation, not empty revenge slogans. A real roster roadmap built directly from what failed and what is already on the way. So maybe that 62-48 loss was not the end of a dynasty. Maybe it was the stress test that showed UConn exactly what the next version has to become. More size, more balance, more toughness, more ways to win when the shots stop falling. That is why the comeback plan starts now, because UConn already has the star, already has front court help coming, already has elite names on the recruiting radar, and still has one giant portal question hovering over everything. And that is what makes next season so fascinating. Not revenge as a slogan. Revenge is a roster plan.
Prime Field